Thanks, Presiding Officer. In moving the Labour amendment today, can I first of all welcome the Fairer Scotland Action Plan and say that whilst we have concerns over emissions from the plan and the questions over the way it is to be delivered and funded, the general direction is something that we will support. Our amendment, therefore, is aimed at being supportive and I hope demonstrates Scottish Labour's wish to work with the Government to do all within the powers of this Parliament to tackle the unacceptable levels of low income and deep-rooted deprivation and inequality that exists in 21st century Scotland. The 50-point action plan will not on its own be able to eradicate poverty, but if delivered will make a big difference for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of individuals and Scottish families. And that's why we believe this Parliament should take ownership of this plan and receive regular feedback on progress being made and be able to scrutinise and debate that progress. This afternoon I listened carefully to what Adam Tompkins had to say, and I conclude that not only do the Scottish Tories have a rather simplistic view of the causes of poverty, but more they are in complete denial about their role in increasing the levels of poverty in Scotland over these last 6 years. The inhumane bedroom tax, the flawed welfare reforms, the sanctions regime and the failure to invest in our economy are all contributors to the rising levels of poverty since 2010. And today the Scottish Tories could join the consensus in this Parliament and condemn the Westminster Tory Government's decision to scrap the child poverty targets introduced by the last Labour Government, but they won't. Let us also be clear, austerity is a key driver of economic failure and deepening inequality in our country. So if the Scottish Tories are serious about addressing the big issues, then I suggest they oppose any further welfare reforms that will drive more and more people into poverty and campaign for an end to the failed austerity policies of their government in Westminster that has increased debt and driven down living standards for millions of working people. But to the SNP Edinburgh Government, I say we must stand up against austerity, not just in words, but in actions. Let us have an honest discussion about how we fund public services. The failure to scrap the council tax is just one example of a failure of our government in Edinburgh to find a more fair way of funding public services. It is a failure that is costing tens of thousands of jobs, whilst vital community services buckle under the sustained cuts to our communities. So can I say the first big test of this government's intention to implement this plan will be their budget to be published later this year. If, as being widely reported, the biggest losers from that budget will be local communities through austerity cuts to local public services, then believe me, inequality will continue to grow in Scotland. Even at this stage, I would appeal to the Finance Secretary to get round the table with other parties in this Parliament and have an open discussion on how we can stop the most severe cuts to public services and how we can build a new public service reform partnership so that all levels of government are joined up together in addressing the major challenges facing our communities in 21st century Scotland. Actions speak louder than words, and we need action to invest and regenerate our economies at the local, the regional and the national level. The action plan states it takes all of us to build a fairer Scotland, a point the Minister Cabinet Secretary has made, and one that is true. But let me say it takes political leadership, strong political leadership, and a willingness to be bold. In Scotland, we spend billions of pounds within the private sector on procurement of goods and services. Let us say that we will use the procurement of goods and services to build a new social and economic partnership in every region of Scotland that will deliver local labour agreements, local skills programmes and an apprenticeship programme in every local authority area of Scotland. a national house building programme with local delivery plans to address the unacceptable housing crisis we have in our country, whilst delivering local jobs, skills and apprenticeships. We are making progress on the living wage, but not at the pace that we need to do if we are to increase incomes by the levels that we must to tackle poverty in Scotland. So we must use the procurement as a tool, and we must commit to ending zero-hour contracts and the growing use of employment agency practices up and down the country. And let us commit to ending the scourge of fuel poverty, not just with words, but with a clear national plan, setting out measurable targets year on year and linking to regional economic strategies with a clear target for jobs, skills and apprenticeships. Joined-up government, bold leadership and a knowledge that we must build new partnerships, a new understanding with all levels of government as equals, with business and industry, with the dynamic Scottish third sector and with community-based action plans the length and breadth of our country. I look forward to reading the responses to the Social Security consultation currently underway, because as the Poverty Alliance have said, we must open up the processes to the experiences of those who live in poverty, and I say that we should build a national consensus against poverty and for action to eradicate it. One of the responses is from the Child Poverty Action Group in Scotland, and they call for a top-up on child benefit of £5 a week, which they say is projected to reduce child poverty in Scotland by 12%, meaning 30,000 fewer children in poverty than would otherwise be the case. As the Children and Young People's Commissioner's Office has stated, child hunger has been linked with depression, suicidal thoughts in late adolescence and early adulthood. Is it not a national disgrace that children in Scotland go regularly hungry in 2016? We have the opportunity to bring together all aspects of Scottish government, Scottish business, Scottish industry, Scottish civic society and Scottish people to galvanise against poverty. An action plan against poverty. Let us show the leadership required and build consensus and build a task force that is required to once and all for all beat poverty in Scotland.